You have your Bibles with you. Let's open it to the passage that was read to us by Brother Joe. And if you were joining us for the first time, we are doing a series. Actually, it started last Sunday. A series of the top 10 struggles of Christians that we face. I mean, when we go to church, we pretend to be everything is okay, everything is under control, everything is manageable. But deep inside, the moment we leave the church, the gathering, this moment, there are some of us here who struggles, and I'd like for us to walk with it. How do we handle those struggles internally? So I don't have the time to have this all top 10 sins and struggles, but I was just starting with basically what is the top 5 struggles. Number 1 is anxiousness. We are sometimes paralyzed by our fear, our worries, and this was the topic last Sunday. And then self-righteousness. We always thought that we are always better than the other person. And then unforgiveness. Yeah, that's a real big topic. Materialism. We focus so much on what we could earn. We focus so much, hey, will that bring me more money than what I'm doing right now? We focus so much on the materialism. And then also gossip. And there's also another thing as so many things, but I just would like to focus on these 5 in the next coming weeks. And the reason why I'm taking this opportunity is because when we come to church, there are a lot of reasons why we are in the church. Now, let me just, some Christians go to church because it is their Christian duty. Oh, we have to be in the church because that is my Christian duty. Some come to church because of the fellowship. Hey, I want to see Joe, I want to see Manny, I want to see Yuvi. I mean, I want to see Tess. The kids, oh, I love the kids. Some Christians go to church because of the fellowship. Others really genuinely worship and enjoy the preaching, because every time they come to church, there is this spiritual renewal. They are being renewed spiritually. So they come to church, but then some also come to church because of need. Some come to church because they need something. They need help. They need encouragement. They need answers to some questions. They need strength because they are growing weary by the day. They go to church because they are in need of strength. They need insight and how they could pass on and how could just move on with their problems and struggles. So, various reasons. Last Sunday we talked about anxiety. Basically, anxiety. Anxiousness, worries. You cannot sleep at night. Your blood pressure is going up. There's so many things that stress you out. Anxiety. I mean, this is all across. Whether you're a new Christian or you're a Christian for the longest time, you are still into this anxiety or anxiousness. And some even Christians take this medication to calm them down. Prescription drugs to calm them down. They don't want to have these anxiety attacks, so they have these prescription drugs. I mean, this is really a reality. Anxiousness, anxiety. Some of us here have had this experience of anxiety attack. That we have to call 911 or brought to a hospital just to calm us down. It doesn't make them a less Christian. Let me repeat that. It doesn't make them a less Christian. How is it that possible? What I'm trying to say is these are realities. It's the struggles that we faced. And I don't want to go back last Sunday because that was the message last Sunday. Now, this morning I'd like to talk about self-righteousness. Another topic that, wow, it really hits the Christian community. Self-righteousness. Self-righteousness. So what is self-righteousness? Let me just go to the dictionary. The definition of self-righteousness is being confident. Confident in one's own righteousness, especially immoralistic and intolerant of the opinions and behavior of others. That's what Webster defined it. Now, biblically speaking, self-righteousness, which is related to legalism, is the idea that we can somehow generate within ourselves righteousness that will be acceptable to God. Two things we have to remember when it comes to self-righteousness. The focus is ourselves, what we can do so we can earn righteousness before a holy God. That is self-righteousness. When we focus so much upon ourselves and what we can do to be righteous with God, a lot of things become secondary. We look down on people. And I know this is very prevalent among Christian churches. Oh, Pastor, do you drink beer? No, I don't drink beer. So how do you consider those brothers or sisters who drink wine or drink beer? Doesn't matter whether you drink beer or wine. The Bible is very clear. Just do not be controlled by the spirit of wine. Okay? Do we look down upon the hey? Do we have this notion, hey, I'm more righteous? Hey, you see? I don't drink beer. I don't drink wine. I don't even watch movies. Huh? I mean, there are Christians like that. They attend service in the morning and attend service in the evening. Well, we have this notion. And I want to address that this morning, this self-righteousness. Self-righteousness. We are blind, church, to our own faults. This is extremely dangerous for those of us in the church. It is a cancer to our ministry, and sadly we have all witnessed dozens of Christians who go down in defeat in very public way due to their arrogance, pride, and enormous ego. So when we talk about self-righteousness, we talk about ego, we talk about pride, we talk about arrogance. Sa Tagalog, hambog, mayabang, walang sinasanto. I'm always right. I'm always right. These are manifestations of self-righteousness. You can scream what you want, but you know what? I'm not even entertaining your opinion or what you say because I know I am right. And it talks about everything. Self-righteousness includes the desire to promote your own well-being at the expense of others. It is an excessive regard to always be on top and have an advantage over others. Self-righteousness makes us focus on ourselves rather than God. You might be, Pastor, is there anyone who is self-righteous in the church? Maybe it's not happening in FICC, maybe it's happening in other churches. Well, just a reminder, just in case, just in case you see some self-righteous in the church. A reminder. So the question this morning is, how do we overcome self-righteousness? Well, what if it happens to us? Or if it happens to you? So how do we overcome self-righteousness? How do we overcome self-righteousness? Now, the passage that was read to us speaks about two persons. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like the other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I have. But the tax collector stood up at a distance. He wouldn't even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You know what? I could go on, but basically, in a nutshell, in that short passage alone, we could know how to overcome self-righteousness. So let us go with the first point, the difference of the two men. Okay? In order for us to really overcome self-righteousness in us, we have to get what the Bible says about self-righteousness. Let's talk about, there's basically two persons here, two men. The first one is the Pharisee. The Pharisee, he had the standard of morality that was far above the standard of the day. The Pharisees fasted Monday and Thursday, meaning they don't eat anything, they just drink water. I mean, imagine that twice a week, Monday and Thursday of every week. He fasts on the grass and not on the net. Okay? He went well beyond the requirements of the law of Moses, and when he says, I am not a crook, he's being honest. He was honest in his business dealings. I mean, if there is one righteous, really righteous person, that was the Pharisee. Imagine, law of Moses says that you should fast. You know what? Yeah, fast. But they fast twice a week. The law of Moses that you should give a tenth of what you have, and he only gave not only the tenth of the net, but the tenth of the cross. And he is honest in all of his dealings. I mean, oh my goodness. That's the Pharisee. The tax collector. What about the tax collector? He was a crook. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that the tax collector was the bad guy in this story. The tax collectors were the scum of the Jewish society. You know what a scum is? What is a scum? When you're taking shower in your shower room and you see some dirt there, you know, in a little corner there's dirt, or in the floor there's dirt. That's what we call scum. Scum. Tax collectors were the scum of the Jewish society. It was the money grubbing. He took money from the Jewish people. He cheats. And he was the Roman collaborators. So they come and they pay their taxes. The tax collector says, well, how much are you going to pay? Well, we earn $100, so our tax is $20. Which is correct. But the tax collector would say, who said that you're only supposed to give $20? Give me $50! Or else I will report you to the Romans. And so this Jewish businessman have no other choice but to give 50 of 100 he earned. But you know what? This tax collector, he will only give $20 to the Romans and keep the $30 to himself. What a crook! What a crook! He was a money grubber, he was cheating, and he was a collaborator of the enemy. So what can we learn? What can we learn? Lesson number one. Whenever we find our religious life is making us feel that we are good, above all, that we are better than someone else, we may be sure that we are being acted on, not by God, but by the devil. The real test of being in the presence of God is that you either forget about yourself altogether or see yourself as small and undeserving. It is better to forget about yourself altogether. The real test of the spirituality, or if you don't have the self-righteousness, is if you feel you were inadequate to stand before God. The Bible is, I could name stories of Peter. When he saw Jesus calming the storm, he was so humbled. And he said, away from me, Jesus, away from me, for I am a man of unclean lips. I mean, that in itself is a landmark, a mark of true spirituality. The moment you realize that you are a sinner before a holy God, that you are nothing without God, that brings you into the realm of dependence on the will of God. So church, so when we check, oh, Pastor, I think this self-righteousness is just sinking into me. I go to church every Sunday morning. I attend a prayer service. I go to a men's Bible study. I go to Friday, help the praise and worship team. On Saturday, I help clean the church. On Sunday, I'm here again. So basically, I'm in the church almost 6 times a week. Oh, by the way, there are people like that, huh? And sometimes you have this notion, and then you see people who are absent in the church, and you have this tendency, you tend to compare. You tend to compare. You have to guard your hearts, brothers and sisters. You have to guard your hearts. Our righteousness is not when we compare it with other people. Our righteousness is when we compare it with the Holy God. And that will always keep us humble. Okay, so that's the difference between those two persons. Now, the difference of the two prayers. Now, remember the parable starts with this two person, the Pharisee and the tax collector. The personality, where are they coming from is entirely different. Now, the difference of the two prayers. Now, there's also two prayers here. The prayer of the Pharisee stood and prayed with himself, God, remember the Pharisee? They love. If there's a Broadway show back then, they will love to be in the Broadway. They will love to stand and pray. God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust adulterers, or even as this tax collector. The Pharisee represents the individual who is comfortable in a religious setting. The Pharisee stands while he is praying. This was a typical posture for prayer, standing with the head, looking up toward heaven, and stretched arms. Man, I'm not telling that we should not stretch our arms. What I'm trying to say is it all starts from the heart. If you are doing that publicly in order for you to impress other people who could see you, then that is wrong. If you want to stretch out your arms so the other people will say, oh, that person is spiritual, and that in itself is wrong. And sometimes Pharisees love to pray very loud, so other people could hear what they are praying. So that is the prayer of the Pharisee. Now, what about the prayer of the tax collector? The prayer of the tax collector also reveals much about what he thought of himself. Verse 13, and the tax collector is standing, remember? The Pharisees went all the way in front, stretched out his arms, and prayed. The Pharisees could not even enter the temple. He was there in the back, standing afar off, would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. This verse says that the tax collector stood at a distance, would not even look up to heaven, and beat his breast. You see the difference? See the difference between the two prayers? The other prays as if God is his audience alone. The other, he could not even dare to look upon heaven. Lesson number 2. The Pharisee had an inflated view of himself. He is downright impressed with himself because he compares himself with others and not with God. He also had a distorted view of others. He builds himself by putting others down. Oh, this is the reality. This is when reality kicks in. Some Christians, they want to elevate themselves by putting in all of these notions, and at the same time, they want to put other Christians down. So that will make them feel good. They would blame other people, but never blame themselves. Because it feels good. It feels good when you keep on blaming other people and you don't have to look at your mirror and analyze and see that it was your own fault. It makes you feel good when you compare what you have done to the less of the fortunate, and you also put the blame on others and never blame yourself. That's hardcore self-righteous. Church, oh my goodness. When you committed a mistake, you simply humble yourself. And I would like to go to the extent, even if it's not your mistake, for the sake of peace, just humble yourself and say sorry. Because relationship is much more important rather than who is right and who is wrong. The tax collector's prayer has the distinction of being one of the shortest prayers in the Bible. Imagine that. The prayer of tax collector is the shortest prayer in the Bible with only 7 words. When he says, God be merciful to a sinner, he makes no excuses. He makes no promises to do something good to earn God's favor. He understood that God does not forgive excuses, but God forgives sins. He has no interest in comparing himself with. He simply admits that he is a sinner and asks for mercy. The Pharisee says, God, I'm so thankful I'm not that kind of person. I'm so thankful that I am not this kind of person. The prayer of the Pharisees, the prayer of the tax collector, God, forgive me, for I have sinned. It was self-reflective. It was between him and God. So church, when something went wrong, we always goes back to the very basic of our faith. It's between you and your God. It's not about you and Pastor Andrew. It's not you and you about FICC. It's not you about your friends. It's really between you and your God. So if you're asked me for a counseling or asked me for some advice, it really boils down to this. It's really between you and God. It's never between you and the church, you and your friends, you and your family. The bottom line is it's between you and God. Okay. So we have the difference of this 2-person, the difference of these 2 prayers, and then there's the difference of these 2 destinations. So what happened, Pastor? What happened to the tax collector? What happened to the Pharisee? 2 distinct destinations. The Pharisees prayed with confidence and no doubt left feeling self-satisfied. The Pharisee felt feeling good. He went home proud, self-righteous. But before God, he was unjustified and under God's wrath and condemned. That's the reality of the Pharisee. Now, what about the tax collector? The tax collector could not bring himself to even lift his hand. The tax collector sorrowed over his sin and pled with God for mercy. Jesus said, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the Pharisee. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. So church, I just want to remind each and everyone here that there is no room to exalt ourselves. Because when we exalt ourselves at the expense of others, God is not pleased. When we exalt ourselves at the expense of other Christians, God is not pleased. So there's no point of exalting ourselves. The Bible is very clear. Let others exalt you rather than you exalt yourself. So if you have the tendency to exalt, But Pastor, I could... No. Remember, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. And he who humbles himself will be exalted. It's better for you to just take the narrow road. Better for you to take the higher road rather than to take, the compromising road. Church, if I may use the word, wala pong lugar ang kayabangan. I repeat, wala pong lugar ang kayabangan sa simbahan ng Panginoon. There is no room. There is no room, church, to exalt ourselves. It happens. I know. You will meet Christians. You will meet pastors. You will meet others who exalt themselves. I keep on reminding Lisa, there was this, alam mo, every time a pastor meets another pastor, the first thing they ask is, Pastor! Ilan na kayo sa church? Naku. Pastor! Ilan na po miyembro? You know what? If a person always starts that way, then you know where he is coming from. The Bible is very clear. God brings people. God brings the increase. God brings the workers. God brings the church. Let us not lose one thing here, church. Everything begins and ends with God. The very reason you are here is not because I am a good pastor. No way. The very reason you are here in this church is because God brought you here. And that's the very truth. God brought you here. And it's never because of me, never because of anyone. It's because of God. So when we exalt ourselves, God will humble us. Or when we humble ourselves, God will exalt us. And all God's people say, oh, grace and every time.